Just a quick thing before we officially start the meeting. I can't remember which conversation with which part of this group this was, but at one point folks said it'd be great to have a chance to meet some of the staff. So we're just assembling. Matt Berlin is our emergency planner and emergency manager is online over here. And maybe you guys can stand up when I say James Dunn, who's our operations manager, and Randy Lyons, longtime operations leader. Colin Rowan, who you guys have met, McKenna Bell with our engineering team, Jasmine Gilmore with our human resources and all sorts of other things, Bill Owen, director of engineering, and I already forgot your name, you're a guest.
This is guest Leo Morley.
Thanks, Leo. Angel Almerendez, did we get that pretty close? And Clint Bollinger is here, our awesome IT person. So directors, these are the people who actually do the work, unlike me, to keep the water moving and everyone's feet dry. And I am very fortunate to have the opportunity to work with them. And I'm excited for you guys to get to know them through your service. They're amazing people and great public servants. So thanks for being here, y'all. And thanks for the moment to introduce them.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you. Need a gavel or something. Oh, there's don't speak too soon. Look at that. What great staff we have.
Warehouse.
Can I get a pointing too?
Let's go. Sorry.
It's not the budget. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. It's so great to see you. I am Lori Stegman, and I have the pleasure of serving as your chair. And our team has been meeting along with Vice Chair Ralston with some staff. And so we wanted to set a professional, respectful tone. So I will be referring to each of you as director over the last. And so I guess you can call us Director Ralston or Chair Ralston or Chair Chair. So we kind of wanted to create some formality out of respect to you all, because you are all contributing your time unpaid, even though I think you get a whopping $50 for being here. But so we just wanted to kind of set the culture and want any input or feedback that you have to have a very professional board, but we're also going to have fun and we're going to do some really important work together. And we've got amazing staff that is going to execute on your vision. So I'm super excited to be here. So good afternoon. And I'm a little bit scattered. I'm running from meeting to meeting. And so Emily, I know where's our agenda. Let's see, I've got it here too. All right, so I've called the meeting to order, and Emily, do you do roll call?
Sure. Director Johnson?
Here.
Director Lane? Here. Director Mueller?
Here.
Director Calkins? Here. Director Eisenbeis?
Here.
Director Johannes?
Here.
Director Stegman?
Here.
Director Ralston?
Here.
Director King? Here. All here.
All right, next up, hopefully you've had an opportunity to look at actually, how many months are there? November, as well as January minutes. And I realized that we weren't here in November and just wanted to let you know that we're not really approving the contents. We're just approving the acceptance of the November meeting. January, I think we are approving the contents and the acceptance. So I would entertain a motion to approve minutes for November and January 16th, unless people have edits or suggestions.
Chair, I would move approval of the November 21st, 2024, excuse me, and the January 16th, 2025 minutes.
And is there a second?
Second. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Thanks so much. I'll second. Thank you.
It's been moved by Director Mueller, seconded by Director Johnson to approve the minutes. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, thank you. The minutes for November and January pass unanimously. Next up, we have Lori Baker, our fabulous, am I saying that movie? Fabulous Baker. Lori Baker to give us a financial report. Lori, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon. Your board packet today includes the December 2024 financial report for the urban district, which includes both monthly and fiscal year-to-date financial information for the consolidated district. So let's take a look at some of the key areas of that report. The district has $15.1 million in revenue for fiscal year to date compared to $8 million in November. This aligns with the fact that collections are fully underway for our major sources of revenue. Oops. Go back. Property assessments and the flood safety benefit fee. The flood safety fee is billed and collected quarterly from our local jurisdictions, and property assessments are collected by the county on the property tax bill, which is due annually on November 15th. You can see that we've collected $9 million in assessments through December, which is almost the full amount of the annual assessment amount that we anticipated collecting in this year. We've billed and collected the vast majority of the first quarter flood safety fee, which is billed directly to the cities and to the county for the unincorporated areas in the district. And billings for the second quarter were sent in December. Grant revenues include state dollars for the 13th Avenue Pipe project of $720,000 and for the Gate Tower project of $553,000 and from FEMA for the PIR pump station project of $434,000. Interest rates on our local government investment pool account, which is where we put our cash to earn interest, continue to be higher than anticipated in the budget, resulting in earnings that are higher than budget. The state is reducing that rate. It feels like almost daily at this point that rate is going down. And so we don't anticipate that we'll continue to have those large variances between budget and actual for interest earnings as we go forward this year. Intergovernmental agreements include $521,000 from the city of Portland and $152,000 from the Port of Portland services that we're providing. This slide shows the general fund spending results by budget appropriation line, and these are the lines that you really as board members are interested in because these are the amounts that we're required to stay within in order to comply with Oregon local budget law. First, you will see the full budget for the fiscal year for the general fund for 24-25. This is the allocation of the budget by month to support review of those spending levels on a monthly basis. So this column shows the year-to-date budget allocation through December. This amount shows our actual spending for the first half of the fiscal year. And the monthly variance for December year-to-date is in this column. So as you can see, we have positive variances, which means that we are under budget year-to-date in all of our appropriation lines. So for the executive director, year-to-date spending includes personnel cost and costs related to our equity consulting. The positive variance in legal reflects the timing of legal billings received for processing and a positive variance because we have an open position in this division. We've talked about that previously. We will in the future want the board to consider whether you want to hire that chief legal counsel or continue to use outside counsel. The finance and administration includes administration, information technology, financial services, board services, and human resources departments. And our positive variance there results from 2.4 FTEs that are open positions and timing differences for materials and services spending. Planning and Public Affairs also has 1.8 FTEs in open positions, resulting in a positive variance for the year thus far. This division is also experiencing timing differences for materials and services spending, including that $500,000 that we've talked about for the new responsibility spending. Engineering and operations has 2.7 FTEs in open positions, and we're also seeing some timing differences in materials and services expense for this division. I will say finance has now hired one of those FTEs, and she starts on Monday, which is a really happy event for us. Planning and Public Affairs has hired one of their FTEs as well, and she started 2 weeks ago.
You see the circle there on the screen.
So we are very excited to have her here with us. And engineering and operations is close to, I think they're checking references for a new hire in operations. So we are seeing some activity. We've also got quite a few positions posted to support our capital projects group as well. For general fund debt service, there's been 2 debt service payments made now for the year to date. One to the county for our IFA loan that was for capital spending on a previous district, and one to Truist Bank for our capital borrowing that came over from MCDD. So we are on track with our payback of our borrowings. In capital projects through December, we had significant activity on the 13th Avenue Pipe Project and the PIR pump station. So this slide shows the year-to-date capital spending in the general fund. So this is not our GEO bond, this is our general fund spending. You can see the major spending to date, both on the 13th Avenue pump station discharge pipes. So that's that $800,000 that you see on the report, and the PIR pump station replacement, which is the design work for the replacement of that pump station. These projects have related grant revenue that we talked about earlier on that revenue slide. Okay. So for the GEO bond, which I'm not seeing that in my slide, we still are really ramping up on the GEO bond for this year. And so we're looking at that staffing. We've got positions that are posted to be able to start to hire more project managers. So you're not seeing a lot of spending to date through December, mainly just the staff that we have that are working on those projects to get us up and running. But we do anticipate that you'll start to see spending ramping up in the second half of the year.
Get the screen working.
I'm good. So if you have questions, I'm happy to respond to those.
Questions, comments?
Yeah, Chair Stegman, I have a question.
Mr. Chair.
The spending rate is, well, at least at the end of December, was like 30% of, or behind, I guess. And I'm wondering if you feel like we're going to catch up in terms of the burn rate of expenditures, or if we're still going to have a fairly large positive balance at the end of the year. And if that's the case, what are the opportunities with that balance? Can we put them into reserve? What should we kind of be thinking about?
Which fund are you looking at? You're looking at the general fund. So yes, we do anticipate that we will have a positive variance at the end of the year. So when we went through the forecast last month, we did talk about the fact that there would be some positive variances in that spending on the general fund, mainly because of those open positions. That when that happens, that money rolls into fund balance and carries forward and is available as a resource in future years. What you will be hearing from me when we start to take a look at the proposed budget next month is that when we look at the 5-year forecast, we don't have a lot of challenges next year, but in year 2, we start to have some challenges because the borrowing that we did with the city of Portland to get this organization up and running, which was a $3.6 million, and it is accruing interest on that borrowing as well. We start to have to pay back that money to the city of Portland in year 2 of our 5-year forecast. So it won't be next fiscal year, but the following fiscal year. We're also working on our CIP right now, and we have some pretty significant general fund capital spending that needs to occur in the next 10 years. So when we what I will encourage you is to be patient because we know we're going to need those carry forward fund balances to be able to fund those costs that we're anticipating in the future. The other challenge that we run into is on the revenue side. We're really anticipating a 3% increase per year in revenue. On our payroll side, our PERS expenses are going up faster than that. And we'll talk a little bit about that when I take a look at the budget next. But there are definitely some things coming up that it will help us, that we've got a little bit of carry forward cushion this year. It's going to help us in the future.
Lori, I have a question perhaps regarding grants. Has the district seen any impact to federal funds that it receives in the way of federal grants that are being put on hold or otherwise withheld?
We have not on the general fund side, and I may call on Colin to help me on the Army Corps side, but on the general fund side, much of our grant funding is coming from the state of Oregon, so there has not been any issues related to the collection. We are a pass-through entity on the PIR pump station grant funds that are coming from FEMA, and the city of Portland is not delaying on our reimbursement. I don't know if they're having issues on their end collecting on that money that that is passing through to us, but we're not seeing delays in receiving that funding from the city of Portland. And we have an agreement with the city of Portland that they provide both the local match and the federal funding. So they have been really good on basis, reimbursing us for the costs that we're incurring for that design work on PIR pump station.
I did check in with my counterpart at the Corps. I would say their morale is not at its peak, but we have appropriated funds for the remainder of the fiscal year for the design partnership that we're in now. Beyond that, additional appropriations will be required, and it's the United States Congress. I am not a gambling man, so I won't predict. However, I do know that we have strong backing from our delegation, and the Water Resources Development Act is a broadly bipartisan program that typically receives both Republican and Democrat support because the projects are throughout districts, red and blue, around the nation. So we remain optimistic and curious about what's going to happen.
Any other questions, comments? Thank you, Lori. I think you have the next. Go ahead.
It may be useful for you new folks. When the new district was set up by the legislature did not provide any operating revenue. So for the urban flood safety and water quality district's initial years of operation, the city of Portland provided a loan, and it was the only source of revenue for all of the governance work, the bond measure development, and all of that. So that is the source of that debt. The historic districts did not have revenue to operate that as well. And Portland was gracious enough to provide us that cash flow to get that work done. So that is the source of that debt, in case you were wondering. And I apologize, I stepped on your line.
No, not at all. So that's the $3.6 million. And then when we consolidated districts, there were 2 capital loans that were held by MCDD. And we have a debt distribution agreement between MCDD and the urban district that transferred those debt balances from MCDD to the urban district. And it's a longer discussion, but along with that, the urban district received a significant amount of capital assets, and they also received a significant amount of cash. MCDD had enough cash to pay off those loans, but when we looked at the financial impacts of retaining the cash and having more time to pay off those loans, it made more financial sense to transfer those loans over than for MCDD to pay them off. Now I can talk about budget. So exciting.
Yes, please.
Right. So staff here are busy working on the proposed budget for fiscal year 2025-2026, which is next year. Budget processes for local governments in Oregon follow a set process. And so we have to comply with what's called Oregon local budget law. Today, we're going to take a look at that process where we will talk a little bit about the board's role in the process and follow up on our discussion about the budget priorities that we talked about at last month's meeting. So as we discussed last month, the budget planning process normally begins in the fall with a discussion between staff and the board about budget priorities. Staff uses those budget priorities to support decisions about what expenditures to include in the proposed budget. So under Oregon local budget law, staff take on the responsibility of creating a balanced budget for the board to consider. In the budget process, the board has two decision points. First, as the budget committee, you will consider approval of the budget. Staff will be presenting a balanced proposed budget for your consideration. We'll also provide a budget message, and that message will help you to understand the items that are included in the budget. So when you get the book, which is pretty thick, what I would recommend, if you don't want to look at every single page, is read that budget message, because that will really give you the information of what is to focus on. Okay, so this message is included in the budget book, and it'll help you really focus on those important parts of the budget. And the budget committee will be asked to approve the budget, allowing staff to submit that approved budget to the TSCC for their review and for their public hearing. So that's the Multnomah County Tax Supervising and Conservation Commission. And they have a group of commissioners, TSCC, that will go through our budget and then provide us with some questions and do a public hearing to allow for public comment about our budget. Once the TSCC has completed their hearing in May, the board will be asked to consider the approved budget for adoption. And we have to adopt that budget before June 30th, or we legally don't have authority to operate starting July 1st. This slide shows you the touch points through the budget process that impact the board. We're here in February, and so we are taking a look at the budget priorities that we talked about last month. In March, you'll be receiving the proposed budget as the budget committee. In April, you're scheduled to approve the budget for submission to TSCC. And in May, the TSCC will hold our budget hearing. The board will be considering the budget for adoption June 5th. We need to adopt that budget by June 30th, as I said, so that we'll have appropriation authority to operate the new district, or the district in the new fiscal year that starts July 1st. If the board members feel like they haven't had enough time to discuss or consider the budget after we've presented in March, we can schedule an additional meeting before you consider approval of the budget. So that will be something that you can ask of us if you do need an additional meeting. So I wanted to take a minute just to give you an overview of our current budget, the 24-25 budget. So as you can see, we started with our 23-24 budgets for all of our legacy districts. That combined was $19.1 million. The main difference between the legacy district budgets for 23-24 and the current year consolidated budget is that $500,000 that we added for the new responsibilities and the addition of the contingency line. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. So what this means really is there was not any excess that was built into this consolidated budget. We took what we had before, we added in our new responsibilities, we added in contingency, which is the best practice, to come up with our budget for this current year. As the staff work on the budget for 25-26, we're taking a similar approach. So in my next slides, we'll take a look at some of the things that impact our assumptions, but I want to talk a little bit about contingency for just a minute. So contingency is an appropriation line in our budget. So it is one of those key lines that gets approved by you as board members that says, here's your spending limit. The special thing about contingency is we can't spend that money. That money is sitting there, and if we run into an unexpected situation where we need additional budget appropriation, we have to come to you as our board and say, this is what we need to spend this money on, but you need to approve it to be able to transfer that appropriation authority from the contingency amount into the budget line where the spending would occur. And we have to come to you with that question and that request to get that approval prior to when the spending occurs. So contingency really allows you some room as board members for those unexpected costs. If we don't spend the contingency, which we don't expect to spend the contingency this year, that rolls into fund balance and becomes a resource for future years. And that number we'll start to talk about as we move into the future of the district. We'll start to talk about the potential for reserve policies, ways to set aside some funds to fund some of those significant capital costs that I talked about that we're coming up upon in future years. So there will be purposes for those funds, but that line is not something that we can spend as staff. We have to come and work with you if there's a need for additional appropriation authority. Right, let's talk about budget climate. So as you can see, a lot of our local partners are challenged with budget shortfalls in the upcoming year and will be determining budget cuts. Our partners at the City of Portland are facing $100 million budget shortfall. Our regular operating budget is about $17 million. They're short by 100, so it's very significant. Although we're not anticipating large shortfalls such as this in our upcoming year, we do respect the local budget situation, are working to ensure that we're creating a cost-efficient budget. We know that our local partners do provide funding for our operations, and so we're being very careful about the things that we will include in that proposed budget that will come forth for you to take a look at. All right, so one measure that impacts our budget discussions is inflation. And as you can see, my chart is already outdated, which really bums me out. I was looking at my notes today. I was like, oh my gosh. So as you can see, inflation hit highs in 21 and 22 and was currently trending down when I made this slide, but now it's going back up, and who knows where it's going to land, but it's very difficult to project at this point what CPI is going to look like. So the CPIW reflects the average change over time in prices paid by urban wage earners. So the Bureau of Labor uses this CPIW when calculating changes to the Social Security payment, or they used to. Staff will be using this CPIW to evaluate recommended wage cost of living increases for our staff. And it's going to, we'll still be looking at this measure when we come forth with our proposed budget, because we can't have a moving target, but it is not looking good at this point. It's really, inflation is starting to ramp back up. So there are two key operating revenues for our district. The floodplain assessments were transferred from the legacy districts via legislation in ORS 550. Assessments similar to property taxes are impacted by compression. We talked about that last month, which can limit increases to revenue associated with those rate increases. We do not have statutory limits to the amount that the assessment rate can be increased each year. Staff will be providing information about the assumptions included in the proposed budget for assessment rate increases. So by approving the budget, the board is also showing their support for the proposed rate increase for the assessments. The flood safety intergovernmental fee is a new source of revenue for the district, which is paid by the local cities and the county using an allocation based on population. The statute allows for this to increase annually by the higher of the CPI, or 3%. The 3% was put into the agreement and into the legislation because it aligns with the 3% assessed value increase that's built into property taxes for all of our local partners. Given the CPI that we discussed previously, that December CPIW, we're looking at a proposed budget that includes a 3% increase to the flood safety fee. We're also looking at a 3% increase to assessments to keep that allocation between assessments and the flood safety fee consistent with what was originally approved when the revenue was developed. So there are also changes that normally occur with our expenditure budget. For salary changes, we historically have worked to align with our local partners on cost of living and merit increases, which supports our compliance with Oregon pay equity regulations. We receive the PERS rate adjustments biennially, and we're experiencing a 6.3% increase in rate for tier 1 and tier 2 employees starting next year, and an 8.6% increase in rate for the OPSERP employees, which is the majority of our employees here who are on our workforce. In materials and services, we're anticipating a continued large rate increase for our utilities. We use zero-based budgeting for both our capital and non-capital projects and use our budget priorities to make decisions on which projects to include in our budget. Okay, here we go, the budget priorities. So in our January meeting, we took a first look at these proposed budget priorities for the upcoming year. And as we discussed, I'm bringing those back to you today, now that you've had some time to think about them. And we welcome any questions you may have or comments. If you want to make changes to these, we're happy to consider those. That's what I've got on budget. Happy to take questions. We did have one question for you too. So we will be putting together the proposed budget books for you, and those will come with your packets for the March meeting. The question that we have for you is, do you want printed versions? And I've got, this is how big it is. This is our adopted budget book, lots of pages. If it will be easier for you to review this, then Emily and I will work together to get you printed copies. If you prefer, we can just send you the link to the PDF. So we just need that feedback so that we know whether or not to print these up for you.
I'd like a hard copy.
Okay. I think, yeah, I think there's enough of you that will just make hard copies. And so we, Emily will be working with you to figure out how to get those copies to you as well. So, and she, bless her heart, will be doing the majority of the printing because my younger daughter is visiting some coaches the week before this is due to you. So Emily will be, I will be buying her some great pieces of chocolate from Georgia when I return, because she's going to have to do the bulk of the work to get those printed up for us. So thank you, Emily. Bless you.
Questions, comments on the budget?
Punctuate, go ahead.
Yeah, Chair. This is a comment about the budget priorities. I think those are good. I like them. I can relate to them. What I'm wondering is, and what I would like to see, frankly, is a fifth one, which is more explicit about flood safety, flood risk management, that more directly, explicitly calls out the mission that the public might relate to more clearly and directly than planning, investment, those kind of words, which are all appropriate. But to call out the fundamental mission, I think would be helpful for me. And also maybe the public would be able to relate to the priorities if they see that.
Is that, I'm just wondering, like, the placement of, like, that's, I don't know, website on.
The budget priorities, they're in the budget book.
Right, well, no, I mean, the Director Ralston, you were
Yeah.
talking about like having more tied into like our mission, have it more directly connected to our budget priorities or at least.
Yeah, maybe have a fifth one that is just called out, flood safety, a fifth priority. And maybe that includes actions like training for flood response or whatever might tie in more clearly, or having more of an umbrella theme across the top about budget priorities that support flood safety, but tie it into the mission a little more clearly in the priorities statement there. Just a thought.
Yeah, try to rephrase to make sure I'm understanding it.
Yeah.
So appreciate that. You talked to me a little bit about this in advance. That's what I was going to bring up. Fundamentally, the budget provides, the baseline is that day-to-day operations. And so I'm comfortable adding that. All these other things are sort of what staff's sort of new and fresh and kind of in addition to. So that's why you don't see that here. We had an interesting internal conversation among staff about that. But I hear what you're saying, and I don't think it's that hard for us to add one potentially even at the top that says, keep the water moving, keep people dry. And then this other kind.
Yeah, the intent is not to change the priorities. It's mostly to bring out one of the obvious implicit priorities. And so if the public's reading this on the website, in the budget book or whatever, it's clear. That's my intent.
And-
So,
And maybe, I know we were talking about financial reports and maybe I'm getting these things too conflated, but like usually like in county government, we have like quote a transmittal. That's like a cover page that says, the 30,000-foot view, and then you have your, so.
And we have that as well, the budget message.
So I
Yeah.
think maybe we just don't have it yet,
Yeah.
but I think once we get that big book, right? It's probably called out there, is that correct?
That's correct.
I'm good.
Okay.
I guess I would say rest assured that we understand our base mission. And what we're trying to highlight here is the sort of novel and newly attention capacity absorbing tasks that we're engaged in addition to that baseline effort of operating the system. But I appreciate your desire to elevate that message. I understand the interest in that.
Thanks.
It might be categorically similar in terms of like elevating the message. With under the focus on equity, I was really impressed by the work that Salmon Creek, just that work in general. And when I was like, went to go look on focus in equity, I was like, oh, I think that's in capital planning and procurement, maybe. But I just like, when I think of community benefit, and of course our internal view of equity and hiring and all the amazing work that you all are doing internally as well is so significant. But I think I have this very like community, for like external first lens of thinking about, if I was reading this, I would have, that's some of the most impressive equity work that I've seen in practice for how do we actually build this into the ways that we produce infrastructure in our communities. So I think it's probably all in communications in general, but I'm just curious in terms of the hierarchy of each of these bullets, if there was any significance in how they were written.
Yeah, I guess I would say in our conversations, and Madam Chair, I'm sorry, I didn't seek acknowledgement.
Yeah.
Safety is sort of what drives our day-to-day conversations, both for our employees and the community. So if there is a hierarchy, it's safety first, and then all the other things come second. And which one is second depends on the day, but yeah.
Well, and this may go to just like this, maybe it's a call-in question or just or community engagement, Margot, how we bring these things out to the world to talk about in practice, the way these priorities are like lived out. And so maybe it doesn't matter at all. And the way that we're talking about it here is a future thing, but I just think there's really great work to be uplifted.
I know that's come up. We've had that come up before as well in terms of how are we talking to the community and making sure they understand what we're doing. So maybe that's just a future note in general that we can come back to, because I know that's my day-to-day work. So I'm always very excited to talk about it more. But it'd be good to get a lot more stuff out to the community.
And not to rain on anyone's parade, but working at the county, we're starting to experience some federal executive orders. And today there was one that was very specific that called out using DEI language that essentially said, you cannot have any. So I don't know, like, this is like just the word equity. And I'm sure you're probably, but I don't know if you maybe have, you can assure us or, you probably have all heard, there are organizations that are scrubbing their websites, they're reviewing their procurement, so, I just want to make sure, like, maybe if you could kind of update us about how you all are prepared if and when that mandate comes. And I know we talked already a little bit about the federal funding and just kind of the impact of those executive orders.
It's an interesting situation for us because it is part of our legislation that formed us as an organization. It's one of those things that we are responsible for doing is equity. And so I think it's going to be interesting, but we will continue the work. And we haven't received any sort of communication from the city of Portland related to that FEMA grant for the PIR pump station. So that really is the biggest federal funding other than the work that we're doing with the Army Corps. So, and the Army Corps is not passing through funds to us. We are providing local funding, their local match. So it'll be interesting to see if the project partnering agreement addresses this at all, or whether there's any expectations from that. But at this point, we haven't received that sort of communication, and it is really critical for us to continue the work because it's part of our responsibilities under the legislation.
So just like I mean, just today, we received some community, keep it up, but we received, like, we haven't received specific orders. That's starting to happen, is what I'm saying.
So I can share that we had a meeting yesterday with our federal lobbyist, and this topic was one of the agenda items. So we're monitoring and trying to be thoughtful. We've also spoken to our state lobbyist, and we don't see impacts at the state level yet. And then what's occurring to me, and I was just chatting with Margot before this meeting about our work and how we talk about it. And I am most interested in starting to talk to the community members who are most impacted by all of this and understanding what their interest is and what the impact might be on them before we rush to make changes. The work that we are doing to improve the belonging and inclusion here in our workplace and with our community continues. And I feel compelled to sort of stand up and resist these changes unless you tell me otherwise. So we're monitoring carefully, and we don't want to disadvantage our community financially, but we feel like with some joyful resistance, we're doing the right thing, and it's actually going to save our community money if we continue this work. So unless you instruct me otherwise, we'll monitor, but we're full speed ahead on trying to improve the working conditions for our people and our relationships with those who have been underserved in our community.
Thank you, Jim. And I think, and we're doing the same thing, is I think it's kind of that soft touch, reaching out to our partners to say, hey, we know things are happening at the federal level, but we still stand with our partners. We're still here, we're still going to do the work. But, you know, if people are not, and I know like government, we're like, oh, don't, you know, like don't move, don't say anything, because you might say the wrong thing, right? But there's a vacuum, and there is definitely a gap for our community partners who like, we want to hear from you. So, you know, this board may want to think like, maybe we want to send something out as a board that says, dear community partners, you know, we want to acknowledge what's happening at the federal level. We want you to know that we have a board that stands strong and staff, you know. So anyway, that might be something. I think that we have a duty to let people know where this board stands. So I'm just throwing that out there. It may not, we may not have to do anything right now, but all of a sudden, I think we have to be ready. You know, hope for the best, plan for the worst.
Addition of another budget priority or the incorporation of this across these categories. I think strategic communications is going to be a forefront that I imagine is embedded in these categories, but I actually think as a board, it's to our advantage to call it out and to have as much focus on that as we do the overall strategic plan or the engagement or equity plan. Both in these sensitive conversations, but even just in the projects and how we reintroduce the agency to the public.
And I don't, Lori and Emily, is like communications, is that maybe included like in that sort of what I call transmittal letter? Or is that something that?
It definitely can be. And we can also take a look at the language in those priorities, because I think it'll fit in there.
Because I think that, I mean, basically it's just like a cover letter saying, hey, here's the things we want to highlight, uplift.
Yeah. Yeah, so I understand the transmittal, but I think, as you know, in the course of doing the work, having strategic communications be an area that we invest in is what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, okay.
We'll see some investments in the proposed budget, and I think we can elevate some language throughout. And I'm pretty clear on how we can add that flood safety additional one. So I appreciate the suggestion. I think it's something we're trying to figure out how to implement.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? All right, thank you, Lori. Next up, we can talk about strategic plan introduction.
Hello, Colin Rowan, Director of Planning Affairs. Today, I'm going to talk to you briefly about some upcoming planning work that we have that will be your board will be very involved with. So first, just want to establish why we plan, right? We plan to be able to understand our own goals and objectives, to be able to articulate that both to our staff and ourselves, but also broader into the community. It allows us to understand different trade-offs that we have. We have to make choices. We have scarce resources. And going through a planning process really allows us to consider what some of those trade-offs are, allow us to define what our priorities are, and really create a path to move forward on those. As leaders of this organization, planning helps you make informed decisions, allocating those resources that are so scarce effectively, and also guiding and leading this district. So really being able to let us staff, broader community know where your priorities are. Planning to staff is immensely helpful because it allows us to talk about the different approaches that we can take. It allows us to identify and recommend paths forward to really meet the vision and statutory purposes of this district. I think really importantly, and touching on some of what we're talking, planning work needs to involve the community, stakeholders, and partners, and bringing that information in to help guide our decisions. It also is a really important tool to provide communication out and let people know what we do and how we prioritize the work that we do. Planning has been happening at this organization previously at the legacy districts for a very long time. And so we have a lot of experience, especially in some drainage planning. That work has really intensified over the last 10 years, largely through our regional partnership between the legacy districts, as well as our regional partners, the cities, county, metro, Port of Portland, neighborhoods, organizations, and others. That work really identified the basis for ORS 550. And ORS 550 is our enabling legislation. It gives us our statutory purposes, which is a great thing to have. That really those are the waypoints in our roadmap that we need to define. We also have been able to have a lot of those conversations and get more buy-in from the public, get more understanding of who we are and what we do, but planning is a tool to build that out. So our opportunity now is to really take the statutory purposes and update them, right? Or not update the purposes, but update our planning efforts to be able to really create this path forward. We have a series of plans that were done by different districts. Some of them have different evaluation frameworks, different priorities. We have things that we've developed with the Army Corps of Engineers, things that we've developed in-house. We need to come up with something that pulls all those pieces together. And so what we are planning on doing is having a comprehensive framework plan. You will see a request for proposals that will go out for that this spring. It's really a sort of a two-step effort that will first really define what our kind of comprehensive or overall how we bring all of our pieces together. And then the second phase will be a strategic plan, which is much more short term. So that kind of comprehensive framework is a 20-year view of what we need to do. And a strategic framework is more of a 5-year action plan or where our priorities, imperatives are. So a comprehensive framework is very vague. So I'm going to try to provide at least a little information about what that will entail and hopefully what it will accomplish. So importantly, we need to implement asset management principles into the way we go about doing. We have a lot of different planning pieces. I'll quickly review what some of those sort of constituent pieces are. But we need to be able to have an overall framework that includes level of service, really what we provide, what level we provide, because that's going to direct all of our performance metrics. That will provide us as a way to really check in with ourselves to see if we're meeting what our goals, objectives are, and the overall mission. We also will, so ultimately the comprehensive plan is work to keep us organized. It's to take all those separate pieces, all those different planning pieces, and make sure that they all talk to each other, that they all are coordinated. It also will tell us what we need to do and if we're doing it well. So I do want to quickly review what some of those other plans are. They were in a short memo that was in your board packet, but you'll see that a couple of them are moving forward. That's because they're pretty important efforts that we need to do some of the baseline work so they can be done in parallel with this more comprehensive effort that will be led by a consultant. So planning efforts that are moving forward are the watershed improvement plan and the facilities plan. There's a great opportunity for having those synchronized with all of this work that we need to do with the board, with the community to really create the sort of overall goals and objectives. We also have ongoing updates to the equity framework and equity action plans that are really embedded into the different departments of the organization and will help guide department level work. We have continuity of operations and emergency planning, operations and maintenance plan, communications and engagement plan that needs to be developed. And then previously, a lot of our work is at the sort of basin or drainage basin level. Updating all of that work with sort of uniform framework is also really important. And something that Bill Owen has done a great job at advancing. The capital improvement plan is really sort of where all these different pieces and identifying what needs to be done. A lot of that work is done within the capital improvement plan. So continuing to update that. We've already made some updates to how that's evaluated and making sure that is synchronized with our overall kind of umbrella plan. So the other piece of this is at more of a higher level and really directing some of the imperatives of the district. And so that's the strategic plan that will be embedded into this work. That's really to have you as the directors of this organization tell us where we should be focusing our funding on a shorter time period, about 5 years, being able to check in and have real metrics meeting those strategic imperatives. So overall, this is to help us accomplish what is established in ORS 550. It's to ensure that we have alignment, transparency, integration, and the ability to really evaluate if we're doing well. So next steps in this work is developing an RFP. I've been working with Matt Berlin, who you'll hear soon. He is a planner as well as with Andrew Riggs, who is our asset manager. So we'll be putting together that RFP to go out and have an evaluation of it. And then you'll be engaged to revisit and realign with our approved mission, vision, values. And that's really going to guide the next steps of the work. So look forward to working with you all on this. Just wanted to give a quick introduction of what's coming up and answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Colin. Any questions, comments? Director.
Chair Stegman, thank you. So I will say I have full confidence in staff, but reading this list of items and the identified 3-year time span strikes me as very ambitious effort to take all of that on. So I'm just wondering if you have any reaction to that.
Sure, but I appreciate that note, and for the record, I'd like to correct this. Really, the comprehensive framework is establishing sort of what that umbrella plan, making sure all those goals and objectives are set so that the kind of nested plans can be done. that's really the next 18 months. So there's no requirement to do that laundry list of plans. They're on their own cycle. And so they will be updated, but they don't need to be updated within that time horizon. So yeah, but they will, I think importantly, they will need to fold in to those set goals and objectives. They will have their own evaluation criteria, but there will be some high level evaluation criteria that will keep them all organized. So thank you for the opportunity to adjust that a little bit.
Colin, don't we have a clock on one of these that, I mean, all of them I think are important. Is one of them called out in the statute that the clock started ticking on us?
Yes, yes.
Three of them?
No, 3 years. So thank you for the question, Director Mueller. The watershed improvement plan is set in statute as a plan that we have to do statutorily, and we have to have the first plan. It will be a plan that gets updated every 10 years, but the first plan must be completed 3 years from July 1st. So basically from the establishment of the district. So right now that project has a RFP that is out on the streets, and that evaluation is happening. It's being led by Carrie Sandeman. There's McKenna Bell who's here, as well as Amber Ayers will be leading that work. But we have a plan to get that done ahead of that requirement. That's the only one that has an alarm clock on it.
The others have alarm clocks, they're just not statutory.
They're adjustable. There's a snooze on them.
Yeah.
No, I think what is also important is that all of these constituent pieces are all really vital for us to be able to develop, crosswalk the statutory purposes and to be able to have a plan that's reasonable and approachable to make sure that we're making progress on all the statutory purposes. It is an expansion from what the legacy district's responsibilities were, and so we do need to have plans so that we can follow them.
Thank you.
Sure. I'm wondering if it might be useful during this first comprehensive plan framework creation to think about what the board's role is in planning here. So to define sort of what our role is. Do we help contribute to guiding principles in planning? Do we test planning assumptions like planning horizons, the scope of planning, and to kind of come to some agreement between the board and the staff about what our role is? It's going to continue forever, all these plans, right? And so to have a little bit of foresight into what our projected role might be on any given plan or even on the comprehensive plan might be helpful for us to sort of gauge our work and the point where we have some influence, the points where we might have some influence. So it might be worth thinking about that as you, over the next months, as you start thinking about the comprehensive structure.
Yes, no, thank you. That is a great suggestion. I think I want to check in even other board members, especially as we have a scope that is drafted, but the particulars of that and the board's role in sort of establishing, especially around the goals, objectives piece, more the strategic level of things versus the more tactical level of things. It'd be great to have full board buy-in.
Even maybe the sequence of the plans. For instance, I know facility planning is on the front burner right now. There's a lot of policy issues that pop up around facility planning, like we're in a floodplain now. Do we want to think about moving out? How big a shop do you need? All those kinds of things are maybe dependent on other plan results. I'm not sure. But if we could have even a discussion around the sequence of some of these plans, the kind of outputs, general outputs of the plans that might feed into, the needs of the subsequent plan, sort of those dependencies. And having an understanding of that sequence would be helpful to it in perspective. Anyway, I'm sure we could have a longer conversation about those kind of topics, but As long as you're thinking about those, it's good. Thank you.
So Paul, you'll be able to come back maybe another time and then maybe we could spend a little more time.
I think maybe having the actual scope of the work and maybe trying to map some of those dependencies might be helpful. And yeah, want to make sure that we're staying forward by it.
And Jim, quickly, we're running a little bit behind, but
I would just note that when you hear the facilities plan contract, you'll see their scope in there for engaging the board at several key milestones. So we're planning that and we need to build that framework so you can give us input. We're not quite ready, but I duly noted and well received.
Thanks.
thank you, Colin. Thank you for the feedback. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Emily. She has a couple of items around policies that we need to make a decision about.
All right, so I have a couple of resolutions before you in your packet. The first is a resolution creating a public meeting policy. If you were able to review the memo, this sort of just aligns us with state law surrounding public meetings. The items included there, there's not too much flexibility because, like I said, it's based on laws that are already surrounding public meetings, and it is something we've committed to adopting some version of this to our insurance company. So that's why it's before you. So I'm glad to answer any questions.
Any questions?
Yes, Chair. As I was reading the whereases, the drivers for the purposes for the policy, it seemed a little compliance oriented toward, best practices with the SDAO and state law. And I thought it would be an opportunity for us to assert the district's values into why we have public meetings. So I'm kind of interested in whether we have room to put into the whereas of the resolution a statement, or this may not be specifically, but a statement, something like this. Whereas the district strives to strengthen the public's trust in the district by being transparent, inclusive, and accountable, and ... than the other whereases. So it's just more of a value statement by the district as opposed to, hey, we're trying to comply with these couple of standards that are good. And by the way, I don't have any amendments or thoughts about the body of the policy itself. That was fine. But I just thought it was an opportunity for us to assert our values in the whereases. So one way to approach this is possibly to hand it back to the staff and say, please create some language, or I can work with you to draft some language, whatever is easiest.
Staff certainly has no objections to adding that whereas. Another way that you could do it procedurally would be for you to make a motion and see if your colleagues agree, and then we'll just incorporate it into the final policy. Or you can assign us and we can bring it back for your consideration. My recommendation would be you amend the thing by adding that phrase at the beginning if your colleagues agree with you. That language is pretty good. Certainly no objections from staff.
You want to work quickly on
Yeah,
that language, and maybe we can go to the next thing. We can bounce back to you once you've written out the.
I got the language.
Oh, you got it?
Yeah.
Well, never
And
mind.
I think Emily may have drafted it up
Look
there.
at you all. You're so-
So what I'd like to do then, I guess to formalize it, is to make a motion to amend the draft resolution 2025-02-01 by adding a new whereas with the language, whereas the district strives to strengthen the public's trust in the district by being transparent, inclusive, and accountable, and as presented on the draft there. That's my motion.
Thank you. It has been moved that we adopt the language as shown. Let's see, do I ask for a second first? So is there a second?
Second.
Okay, and it's been a second. How did I say is it
Eisenweiss.
Eisenweiss? It's been seconded by Director Eisenweiss. Questions, comments, discussion?
This would be a vote to amend the draft resolution. And then we would vote on adopting
Thank you for that.
presumably the amended resolution, assuming that passes.
Yes. Other questions, comments? Okay, so all those in favor of the amendment, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, so the amendment passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Now we will vote on the resolution.
Sure. So I have a comment if we can still discuss
Yeah.
the resolution,
Sure.
which is, I guess it's a question, which is, last meeting, we had some discussion about whether to provide for an opportunity for public comment on meeting agendas, which I saw is on the meeting agenda for today. But I did not see in this resolution. So my question is, should that be in the policy?
My recommendation would be to adopt like a separate kind of like public testimony policy. That way you can outline like all the details you might want in there as far as like sign up ahead of time, any kind of time limitations, and you can get more into detail on those pieces would be my recommendation. Like I said, this is mostly things that are as it is required by law. And so the good news is we shouldn't really have to update this unless there's legal changes at the state level. And if we want to kind of modify our procedures around public comment, I know the bylaws might be another place for that kind of detail, but my personal recommendation from experience would be probably to have a dedicated public testimony policy.
Is that acceptable, Director Hyde?
I would say that I'm undecided on this. I appreciate the recommendation. I'd be curious as to whether other board members have any thoughts on this. I do think that it's important that we continue to provide an opportunity for public comment, and that we probably need to memorialize that intent somewhere.
You're correct, and I did not ask for public comment. It says right there, public comment, right? So that was my mistake, so I should have asked for it, but I need to, by having instructions for public, usually that's like posted somewhere that says you have 3 minutes to speak, things like that. But yeah, so I was remiss in not calling that out.
And it was not my intent to
No.
point that out.
No, but I was like, oh no, I forgot.
And if you're interested in having a dedicated public testimony policy, I can put that on next on the to-do list also.
I guess I will say for my part, I am comfortable proceeding with staff's recommendation. But I would like to hear from other members of the board.
So I agree. I think it's important. And I like the recommendation to deal with that in a separate policy, a separate vehicle. We can talk about it a little bit more, think about it, and be, just more deliberate about how we set that out.
Direction I'm hearing is that we'll bring back a public comment product for your consideration in March. And I will share that your staff is committed to that process and to public comment as well. So we will remind you, and Madam Chair, we would have spoken up at the beginning of the meeting if we were aware of somebody wishing to make public comment.
Thank you.
We do not have that.
You got me, thank you.
You can ask at the end and say, does anybody who's joined want to say something if you choose to?
All right, if there is no more discussion, actually there'll be another chance. So I would entertain a motion to accept the amended resolution.
Madam Chair, I move to adopt resolution 2025-01, adopting the public meeting policy for the district.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, it's been moved by Director Miller, seconded by Director Lane. Any other further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of accepting the amended resolution as proposed, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. The resolution passes unanimously. Thank you.
The next item I have in front of you is a resolution establishing bylaws. We do have bylaws that were previously adopted by the interim board. These are a bit more simplified and sort of remove all the references to the interim board and assume that you all are. The board in this version is permanent. The purpose of bylaws is really to establish policy that's related to your role and the roles and policies around board function. So, some of these are in line with legal definitions, and then some of these are sort of based on our staff recommendations for how your meeting should run. So if you have any questions about them or any ideas, I guess I wanted to point out, I'm glad to take some discussion on this. That you are operating under some bylaws, and I think we want to get this right. So if you have feedback or comments, we can certainly incorporate those and bring this back next month as well.
Questions, comments about them?
Having lived under the previous set of bylaws and the interim board, I greatly pleased by this slimming down of the kind of the excessive kind of replication of what was in the statute and kind of other places that I was going to say previous, but I guess they're technically the existing bylaws are a bit cumbersome and a little overweighted. So, you know, I'm very supportive of the new improved proposed version.
Any other questions, comments? All right, I would entertain a motion to accept the resolution on the bylaw.
I will move to adopt resolution 2025-02-02, adopting a revised set of bylaws for the district and repealing the bylaws adopted in January 2024 in their entirety.
Okay, and is there a second?
Yes, I.
All right, Director Lane has a motion to approve the resolution as stated. Director Calkins has seconded. Any comments, discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, it passes unanimously. Thank you so much. All right, we're going to have for last time. Next up, we have Matt Berlin, who is going to talk about the facilities plan development.
Madam Chair, I think before we do that, Lori was going to do it. No, sorry, never mind.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to try to upload my presentation here. Oh no, it says I can't share. Okay. Let me see if I can get my slides available.
We're working on it here too, Matt. Maybe we share.
It was working prior, but it looks like it won't allow me to share the slides here. Are they available there to share?
Let me pull them up for you.
We're working, Matt. 1 second.
Sure thing. Thank you.
This is a new system for us. We're learning. So thank you for your patience. Commentary while Emily's doing this. It's very impressive to watch her navigating.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you so much for your help. And I'll just call out when we need to shift slides. So thank you, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Matt Berlin. I'm the emergency planner at the district, and I apologize for not being with you today in person. I'm really looking forward to meeting all of you. But I'm the project manager for the facilities plan, and I'm here today to request the board's approval to move forward on a professional services contract to help us develop the plan. I've provided a board memorandum in advance of this meeting and a copy of the proposed contract for your review. And I threw together a few slides just to provide a brief high-level overview of the project scope, the consultant contract, work elements, and the project schedule and engagement opportunities to help in your approval decision. You can move to the next slide. Thank you. So it was nice to hear the conversation and the questions asked of Colin. There were a lot of words that I'm going to use that were used in that conversation as well. And I'm going to start with, why do we need a facilities plan? Maintaining and upgrading facilities is essential to our organization, especially in the face of a changing climate, more frequent and intense storms, and increased natural hazard risk. And in addition, yes. Sorry, I thought I heard somebody step in there. In addition, over the last few years, a shifting work environment looks to require perhaps different needs to balance administrative and operational work functions. And finally, we have a broader district mission, and the timing is right to assess how facility investments will help meet district goals. So to address these needs, the Urban District's Facilities Plan will assess existing conditions and needed improvements to facilities, infrastructure, and systems on the district's campus. And again, we're looking carefully at the district's campus, the headquarters, and the areas around the shop and the administrative building for this analysis. But we'll also look at identifying and evaluating alternative locations that could help meet the district needs and modernize our service delivery. The plan will help us prioritize investments to optimize operational effectiveness for the near and long term, and will ensure that future investments demonstrate the district's commitment to the purposes defined in ORS 550. Next slide, please. We have selected the firm Convergence Architecture to help us develop this plan. The total contract is $474,308, very specific. The schedule is a 22-month project schedule that will begin towards the end of this month and will go until January 2027. I did want to take this time to just call out a few key contract elements that I think the board would have particular interest in. First, the staff and board engagement is very central to this planning process, and that's important because we need to clarify our vision for the short, medium, and long term. And the consultant's going to help us do this through visioning and staff interviews, an equity workshop with the formation lab, a series of presentations at the project team, staff level, and board level in order to engage and collect and reiterate that information back to all of our stakeholders. The analysis of existing conditions is really important in identifying where our opportunities and constraints are. During this phase, we'll be looking at structural evaluations, the mapping and conditions of our wetlands and vegetation and our landscape. We'll be looking at real estate market analysis in the surrounding area to understand where the potentials are for adapting our service delivery over this time. The consultant will really focus on developing a set of evaluation criteria and a methodology that assures that our decision-making will be transparent and will show how we're valuing the improvements to make. And this will involve a series of goal setting exercises, our risk assessment, and a framework that adapts as we learn more about our capacity and capabilities. And this is really important as this plan, as you indicated earlier, and the director asking about the timing of these plans, that this facilities plan will nest within the broader strategic plan effort that Colin described earlier, and it will align and allow us to exercise some of the programs that are developing concurrently, including asset management, emergency operations, and the watershed improvement plan. Next slide, please. So the incremental planning process will rely heavily on staff involvement and input. Board engagement will be integral to a successful outcome, and the project team will report updates at several key stages. So during the early visioning and goal setting stage, when the consultant will share the results of these exercises to inform the methodology for prioritizing our investments. So this is when we're bringing information in and we'll have a chance to report that back to the board. Later, at the end of the risk assessment phase, which would be around July 2026, we'll have a chance to share draft recommendations when the consultant has demonstrated their methodology and recommended investments for district facility upgrades. And then later than that, towards December, at the end of 2026, we'll have a chance to share a draft plan when the consultant has developed an implementation plan that schedules out these recommendations over the short, medium, and long term. So we're trying to offer many opportunities to have this ongoing conversation to keep the board involved and to keep the formation of this methodology continuing to upgrade and provide a really useful outcome. Next slide, please. So in total, the facilities plan will provide a strategic guide for us to ensure that our investments support the district's mission and ensure efficient and effective operations. We're recommending the board approve the contract, and I've included the action and motion language on this last slide here. And with that, I'll complete my comments and I'll yield the remainder of the time to the chair for questions.
Matt, all over
Yes.
These comments
I'm sorry, can you say that one more time?
to the board for questions and comments. Director Hawkins.
Thank you. After the risk assessment, and I understand the opportunity to evaluate location in general, is the cost for the facilities improvement already pre-budgeted and identified, or if there were changes to location, when would that additional budget need to occur and when would we approve it?
Changes to location or other capital changes.
Like with risk assessment, if there was we are in a floodplain, like if there was like some large change identified through this project, when would that be figured into the budget of the actual facility build out?
It
Excellent.
will.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Lori, why don't
Apologies.
you take the first crack at that?
Sure. So this is the planning process to really give us the feedback for what we need to do with our facilities. So then there is a component of the CIP that has dollars for a facilities investment in future years that you'll see when you look at the budget document and the CIP. There are not dollars for replacement of facilities years budget at this point, but in those out years, we do have dollars that are estimates at this point because we don't know what the recommendations will be. There could be recommendations to update the facilities at this location. There could be recommendations to find a facility that's outside of the floodplain. We could look at renting a facility. We don't know what the recommendations will be. So we've put a placeholder of dollars in the CIP to address those costs, but we'll have better information once we go through this planning process to know what we need to include in that budget going forward.
Yes. Matt, I have two questions. One is, I noticed that there was only one proposer on this project. And I'm wondering if number one, if you're comfortable with the fact that you had one proposer. And obviously you're already bringing it to us, but is there any trepidation around that at all? But probably more important for the board, is there anything the board needs to be aware of in terms of the procurement process policy that would come from a lessons learned from this process that resulted in one proposal? In other words, is there a lesson learned from this that we need to be aware of that might influence a change to procurement policy that the board would need to do? Anything like that?
Madam Chair, if we may have Lori start with the broader procurement policy question, and then Matt can address the review of the applicant, proposed contractor.
So there's a couple of pieces in that question. First, the process. So we went through a full procurement process, including pre-meeting to meet with potential bidders to talk about the work to be done. We went through a full process and we did just receive one bid. At that point, we had a conversation amongst ourselves in the procurement team to talk about the process. We felt very confident that we went through a full process. And what we committed to was that we were going to very carefully review this proposal. We were going to very carefully follow up with references on this proposer to make sure that we felt that we were very confident about the product that was being proposed. And after going through that process, we did feel confident. We talked to a lot of folks that have worked with this group that felt very positively about the results of the work. So we felt confident in bringing that forward to you all to consider as the group that will be performing this work for us. We are also going back and reaching out to those folks that originally were interested in this proposal, asking them for feedback. This was timed around the holidays, so we're really following up with them to see, was the timing difficult because we had a process that had a due date that was within the holiday period. If we get feedback that that did impact the bid process, we will make sure that we don't follow through and have bids that are due during that time frame in future years. So we are doing a lot of evaluation of the process. I don't believe that this is a procurement control or policy issue. There will be times that you find that we do only get one bidder. And when we start working on construction bids, it will be really interesting to see what the environment is and to see what kind of responses we get. So there are times when you'll only get one bid. And those times we really do a careful evaluation of that bid to make sure that they'll meet the needs of the organization. And if we come to the conclusion that they wouldn't meet the needs of the organization, then we would start over and reissue and try to get different results. Again, following up with those initial groups of folks to find out if there are specific issues that we needed to address to be able to get more responses. So
I'm glad you guys look back and did a.
Yeah, but we do feel confident in this one, and we do feel like that they are prepared to provide the services that we need.
Thank you.
Did Matt want to add anything to that? Yeah, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, thanks. Thank you, Lori. That is a great summary of how we did it. I did just want to add that in the evaluation committee, the committee members, we don't discuss the proposals as we review them. Each committee member came back and the proposal was ranked consistently and it was ranked highly. That was the first piece of information that was helpful. I spoke to each of the references. They were not just positive, they were very, very good reports from a variety of different kinds of contracts held with Multnomah County and 2 City of Portland bureaus. So we did feel comfortable, and so far we've been very satisfied with their work.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Matt or Lori, is there, I guess, has there been an evaluation of the need to see the ways that it's similar or different from partner agencies? I'm thinking specifically about Metro and Port of Portland that have really strong outcomes in this area, getting strong participation in these bid processes.
Absolutely. So our procurement policies are really follow the Oregon law. And so the things that we're doing are following what we're supposed to be doing under the Oregon statute. But we do quite often outreach with the City of Portland, with Multnomah County, with Metro to make sure that we are following best practices along with them. And in fact, one of my procurement people I hired away from the City of Portland. So we are going to, and I will be talking about this a little bit later in this meeting, we will be coming to you with some changes to our local contract review board rules next month, as well as taking a look at some of the delegations and how things are working. But we do feel confident. We have had some very strong results with our proposals. We're doing a lot of outreach. In some cases, we're doing email outreach to potential vendors prior to issuing those RFPs to try to drum up more business. It really is an interesting business doing public procurement. There are times when there are a limited number of vendors that are available. And so it depends on what else is on the street that they're looking at and whether they feel like they have the capacity to be able to do the work. So, but yes, we are consistently looking at those other policies and procedures. And we oftentimes with our bid processes will bring in individuals from those local partners to be a part of the group that's evaluating the proposals to provide us that support as well.
Just a quick follow-up. We are in the process of trying to get with Metro to talk about the Construction Careers Pathways program for our capital spending. We've been missing each other. I just sent an email actually during this meeting. I'm sorry. And you'll see through our equity action plan development, we're not there yet, but obviously procurement is a really important place for us to consider changes that make our program more approachable and equitable for small and emerging businesses. So we do have more work to do there, but that's part of that equity action planning that is in the works.
Other questions, comments? So I'm just trying to understand, so I'm in this meeting. So you're wanting to contract, I mean, $474,000, and I don't know what it costs. It seems like a lot of money. But I guess what I hear you saying, like, yes, this is the going rate to have people come into facilities planning. It just seems like we're not even getting a building, we're getting a plan.
A couple of thoughts. It's a 2-year process. And second, it's the headroom in the contract and not necessarily what we'll spend. And it's going to provide a lot of really detailed information to allow us to assess where and how we want to build out a better shop and facilities for our operational system. I had the same questions because it did seem like a big number, and having sat with Matt, walked through the scope, I had probably a stronger reaction than you did originally, and I feel okay about it. Bill, would you like to?
If you don't mind.
Please, Bill.
So Bill had a similar reaction when I was looking at the proposal. I was part of the evaluation team. So I went back and looked at similar master plan efforts that we've done in past years. And we're in the same ballpark. So those master plans were 400,000, but those are several years ago. So I'm talking about a 50% increase. So it does seem like a lot, but it feels like it's in the range.
Okay, no, that's fair. So I guess I'm trying to envision, you're talking about this whole campus, right? And there's a pump station. What's over there in that building?
You're correct. There's a pump station right here, and then the shop and other ancillary buildings associated with the shop.
And the urban flood safety, you all own this property. So a number of things, it could be staying on this, but I mean, I'm not sure, you can't move that pump, can you?
No, we are not moving that.
We could, but it would be really expensive.
Really expensive.
Okay, so it's not, so a facilities plan is not just the building itself, but anything on the property, right?
Yeah.
It's fencing, it's security, it's piping under the ground. So it's a little more involved than just just the buildings themselves.
Right, yeah, and that's what I was getting at. There's a lot of, I don't know, geotechnical, I mean, there's a lot more to it than just a building. Yeah.
That's correct.
Okay, no, that's super helpful. I just want to make sure I understood what it is that we're buying. No, that's helpful. Thank you. Appreciate it. Other questions? All right, so we need to vote on this, Lori? All right, so I did see some language in there somewhere. Can you pull up
The language
Yeah.
again, that's in the slide.
I had it, excuse me, I had it on the last slide of the presentation that I put up
Pulling
there.
it up, thank you.
They're on page
Yeah,
63.
brought it up if we need it.
There it is. All right, I would entertain a motion.
There, I move to approve and authorize the executive director or their designee to sign a contract with Convergence Architecture to develop the UFSWQD facilities plan with a contract value of $474,308.
Thank you. And is there a second?
A second.
It's been moved by Director Johnson, seconded by Dean. Any questions, comments, discussion? All right, hearing none. All those in favor of the staff recommendation, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, it passes unanimously. Thank you so much for entertaining our questions.
Yeah,
So,
thank you.
Yes.
Good questions, and I'm glad that that several of us asked. So.
Thank you, Matt. We appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, and now Lori, I think I wanted to turn the meeting over to you before we move on. Sorry, it's Colin first.
And then
Then Lori. All right, Colin.
Pull up. In your packet, there's a single slide for this. But I was asked, and from the orientation you had, the self-styled historian for the district, I regret not putting on a tweed coat today, but I was asked to give a little bit of a background on our accreditation review. And wanted to start off just with a quick language piece, which I'll preface by saying it doesn't really matter, so don't get too hung up on it. You'll hear the word certification and accreditation. Certification is the specific sign off on a process that we need to do. And it's really a bunch of different pieces that come together. We have a certification package, and it's a sign off that lets us comply with FEMA. Accreditation is FEMA's basically acceptance of that certification work. So we can talk about the projects we have to do as certification projects or as accreditation projects, and it's okay. So yeah, release that tension. So what is levy certification? So levy certification is steps that we have been really digging into starting in 2013, but intensified over the last 10 years through the Levy Ready Columbia process to update, improve our levy system so that we can maintain FEMA accreditation. FEMA accreditation has some huge importance for people that live and work behind our levy system, and really for the region, state, and beyond because of some of the economic impacts. So having a certified and accredited levy means that the properties behind the levees are not mapped as high risk flood areas. They're mapped as a medium risk. The mapping is done by FEMA through their flood insurance rate maps. It also allows for cities and land use organizations to map the floodplain as basically as developable. And so properties that are developed behind the levees don't have to take all the mitigation. And if you think of the mitigation efforts on that, we, I think generally as an organization and staff, encourage any kind of mitigation that people would like to take. We are not a land use or regulatory organization, but when we think of some of the flood depths behind the levees, we're talking 10, 15 feet. So it would be an immense amount of mitigation. So really fortifying the levee system, making sure it functions properly is where we're at. There's also a huge impact to individual property owners, and why certification is so important. If you have a mortgage and it is federally backed, and there's huge different, the Veterans Administration, housing, urban development, a lot of other groups back mortgages. If you have a federally backed mortgage, it cannot be in a high risk flood zone. So anyone that had those mortgages would be at risk. And then also any kind of development or redevelopment, anything from if you're pulling a permit for a fence all the way to redeveloping some kind of industrial or warehousing area, it would all be either stopped, halted, or would require an immense amount of additional funding. So a lot of businesses would necessarily need to move. So the implications, repercussions of not having a certified levy system that's accredited are pretty huge. I don't need to dig deep into the different pieces that bring us into the certification, but I will highlight that starting really in 2013 with our Levy Ready Columbia effort, we were able to kind of bring together all the people that are responsible for this. That's the cities, the county, regional governments, and the legacy drainage districts, to pool together the funds to do the first ever investigation of levee system. So we had been operating these for close to 100 years, but had not done a deep dive investigation on them. We did find that there were design criteria, interior drainage issues that needed to be addressed. We also found out that there were operations and maintenance issues that needed to be addressed. And so that informed a work plan that we've developed. And you'll be hearing soon about a couple of the projects that are addressing those. Some of those projects are addressed through the Portland Metro Levee System study with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And some of those are our own responsibilities. They don't meet the criteria or that federal nexus where the federal government will be partnering with us. And so we've been making some great progress on that. We completed all of those investigations in 2018. That's the same year that we started a 3-year process with the Army Corps of Engineers to see if there was a federal interest in investing in our system. At the same time that the Army Corps of Engineers was doing their work, we continued making progress on the projects that were sort of left out of that study. We did the planning work. The Levee Ready Columbia had a technical advisory subcommittee that really guided that. And then we actually completed the pre-designs. And from there, our engineering team has taken those up and has done a great job of advancing those. So that's what you'll be hearing more about the task orders that are coming up. This is definitely one of those things that, to me, we had a facilitator for Oregon Solutions at Levee Ready Columbia Group who talked about T+20, which is it takes 20 times of hearing something for it to sink in. So I really encourage that this is important for our organization, and having an accredited system also is part of our federal responsibility with the Army Corps of Engineers and staying within their, they have a program that's called the Rehabilitation Inspection Program. For accreditation, we have to be in that program. So it's really tied to the core parts of your mission with this district. And some of the nuances and some of the, the flood insurance related elements are really wonky, but I really look forward to talking more to you about that. And if you have any questions, I know we're stressed for time here, but be very happy to talk to anyone who wants to nerd out a little bit about that stuff.
If I may just punctuate, the 2 task orders we're asking you to approve are the result of that 11 years of effort and are required to keep those projects that aren't the core that are ours.
Thanks for the fluctuation. And cheers, Dogan. I wish.
Yeah. By the way, we're having a lot of conversations about the shape of the table and the space in the room. So we're happy to get your feedback and try and make it right. And as the seasons change, the glare will be in someone else's eyes.
On the sun angle, make sure.
And so, Madam Chair, what we'd like to do, because task orders are different than contracts, and in talking to Lori and Phil, we thought some of you who haven't done a ton of public procurement might want to understand a little bit of the difference. And so Lori's going to give you an overview of contracts, task orders. I don't mean to say what you're going to say, but try and give you that background so that you're more comfortable considering the votes we're asking of you following that.
So I'll try to be quick so that I don't take McKenna's time, but McKenna is going to talk to you about a couple of task orders that we need approval for. So a task order is really a subset of a contract that has already been approved previously. So the dollars and the language of that contract have already been reviewed and approved. A task order is really a way for us to manage the contract. So in some of our contracts, we will have the overall contract that says it's worth, for example, $1 million. And then within that contract, with every specific action that we want that contractor to do, we'll write a task order and say, you're going to do these 5 things and it's going to cost this dollar amount. So this is really kind of a duplicate approval we're asking you to do today. And what you'll hear from me next time is I'm going to ask to have you consider changing our delegation rules so that once you've approved a contract, we don't have to bring those task orders in front of you to approve the task orders too, because you've already approved the contract and we're just managing that contract. The way the rules work right now, and because I wasn't quick enough to get ahead of McKenna with these task orders, she's having to come forward and ask you to approve these, but they are part of a contract that's already been reviewed and approved. So this is the way we manage and define the work and the dollars that are being spent on those contracts. So we have controls over both our contract process and our task orders that include a budget review. So we make sure that we have appropriation authority before we ever come in front of you and say, will you approve this contract or task order? We have the dollars to be able to spend. If we don't, we won't bring it in front of you because we can't spend more than what our budget authority is. We also have template contracts and task orders that were actually originally prepared by our outside counsel. And if we have any changes that we need to make to those standard terms, we have legal review of that. We don't pull together contracts without having that legal support. So if there's anything odd, if we're in a contract negotiation and we're asked to change something that seems odd, then we pull in our support from Miller Nash and they help us to review that and make sure that we're not taking any undue risk for the organization. So as I said, next month, we will be bringing some changes to those local contract review board rules for you to consider, as well as some changes to the delegation so that we're not asking for repeat approval with those task orders. We'll just have you take a look at the original contract. But until that point in time, we do need you to consider these task orders, which are above the $100,000 board approval limit. So I'll go ahead and hand over to McKenna at this point so that she can talk about those two that we would like for you to consider.
You're welcome. Hi, I'm McKenna Bell. I'm with the engineering team. Great to be here today. So yeah, the first of these two accreditation projects that we're going to talk about is the Sunderland Levy FEMA accreditation. It's actually right behind us. You can see an overview on that on page 92 of your packet that shows where it is. So this levy section does not meet the federal safety standards. We are aiming to make it safer by reducing the slope and improving stability. So as Laura mentioned, we have an existing contract already with Cornforth Consultants that the former MCD board authorized about a year ago. And we completed the first task order in this past December that covered initial concept development, equity charrette and equity plan that I think I heard mentioned earlier too, and an alternatives analysis. And so we were able to identify two alternatives for this that we're hoping to move forward for 30% design. Those are included in your packet too, if you're curious. And so, yeah, we're just asking for approval of this task order for $367,000 for this 30% design task order and a geotechnical analysis. And just for context, the overall project budget for this is about $8.9 million. And we'll complete this task order by the end of June, so in this fiscal year as well. So it'll be more to come. Thank you.
So any questions, comments? If not, I would entertain a motion, and I think it's on page for the diagram. 91 is the language. Action request.
Chair,
Yes, sir.
I move to approve and authorize the executive director or their designee to sign a task order with Cornforth Consultants for design services for the Sunderland Levy FEMA accreditation project for $367,000.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Director. It's been moved by Director Eisenbeis, seconded by Director Johnson to approve the executive director or their designee to sign a task order with Cornforth Consultants for design services for the Sunderland Levy FEMA accreditation project for $367,000. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Any abstentions? All right, the motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
I'm gonna stay up here. Yeah, Mindy is out sick, so I'm gonna cover this. So yeah, my colleague Mindy Weimer is managing this one today. So this project's actually under the same contract with Cornforth. And this segment is just north of Blue Lake and Fairview. There's a map of that one on page 119. And the issue with this one is there's extensive animal burrowing there and steep slopes and excessive vegetation. So the design that we came up with here is to actually create a setback levee. And then that way we can preserve animal habitat and the existing vegetation while also improving levee safety and climate resilience. So for this task order, it's pretty similar scope, completing 30% design for this setback levee and a geotechnical investigation. And the task order budget is about $385,480. And then the total project budget for this one is $24 million for this project.
Any questions, comments?
Question. And it's probably as described, but could you briefly, a setback levy, could you describe the difference? Obviously, it sounds like it's, you know, setback.
Yeah, so
To just confirm, because I was having trouble imagining.
yeah, so basically it's, and there's actually the ordinance are included on here, which you can kind of see the profile, which helps. It's on page, starting on 120. So if you see that like cross section, and you can see the dotted line is the existing profile, and it kind of just extends the profile so that we can leave that factor of safety without having to, so we can leave the riverward slope that has issues and then have that safety element on the other side. Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? All right, I would entertain a motion, and the language is on page 111, under action requested.
I would move to authorize the executive director or their designee to sign a task order with consultants for $385,480 to complete the 30% design of the setback levee and conduct a supplemental geotechnical investigation to support the final alignment for the FEMA Salmon Creek Levee Accreditation Project.
Thank you, Director Calkins. Is there a second? Any discussion? All right, it's been moved by Director Calkins, seconded by Director King to accept the motion on the floor. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? All right, thank you. The action passes unanimously. Thank you. Good, we're back on schedule. All right, we've gone through all of the agenda items and we have a place for new business that we just kind of wanted to hold open. And Vice Chair Ralston, you might like be able to refresh my memory if there were specific things, or Emily, that wanted to share or bring up.
I don't believe so. I think one thing that might be worth just reminding folks of is the draft look ahead agenda that Director Mueller requested last time. And maybe ask if anybody has questions or comments about that.
They're not the Westlake survey work or the.
No, those items got cut. I just sent that out like yesterday, so. Sorry.
Oh, you have a new agenda.
Right, the updated agenda I sent out, yeah, I did not.
We saw some opportunities to live the new agency's values. We can keep those projects moving with current contracts, but we felt like we should go out and do a new RFP to reflect the social justice and equity components in our contracting. And we can keep those projects moving now with an existing contract and task order, and then we'll come back after an RFP for additional services. I'll call survey services. So hopefully a win-win in the end.
So this is just a time if there's anything else you'd like to discuss, highlight.
So the vice chair took the words right out of my mouth in terms of asking about the look ahead calendar. So at one point, we were going to have an executive session today on real estate. So maybe you could highlight for us what that is and where that's headed and when it might land, since it's not going to land today, I assume.
Staff, back me up if I'm inaccurate or incomplete. We are going to need to likely acquire a specific property to complete the PMLS project. And we, through our due diligence, realized we needed a little bit more legal consultation before we brought those items to the board. But ultimately, it is likely that we will need to acquire that property. And so we are working through, we have never acquired a property like that. And so we want to do all of our extra checking with our lawyers to make sure we set that up correctly and set a really good precedent for the future real estate. And I regret that it made it on your agenda. So, but it's based on really trying to make sure we get it right and protect
So we
both
think,
the landowner and the district.
so we think that's a March or an April.
Probably, yeah, depending on what the outcome of the additional legal review is and what your role needs to be to protect everyone's interests.
And then I was going to ask about what's on March. Lori already highlighted or previewed that the local contract review board adjustments, and then there's the gate tower, geo bond, insurance review, base study update. Didn't know if there's anything we needed to be thinking about on any of that for next month.
It's a lot of that is informational. There are a few decisions. Yeah.
And the state debt offering actually is going to push 1 month because we're still working with them to get the correct documentation. So
I was wondering, just a procedural, is it possible to put like hot links, because the packets are so big and I'm like scrolling to agenda items so that we can just like click on that agenda item, then it'll just take us directly. And then maybe have some, either a hot link to the verbiage for the motions too, because I'm like, where's the motion? Or have us, whatever,
That makes that accessible.
or have it, on the agenda page so that we don't like have to like, because I'm like, okay, I've got the agenda open up here and then follow along. So just so that we're not like I know I'm kind of like frantically looking for things and then I don't know, I think there was one, maybe it was Matt's presentation, like, I don't think it was in the.
No. And
Or maybe they're like, because the packets are so big, like a portion, or if you just have a link. That is just like the presentation, the slide decks versus like all of this. Anyway, it's just, it's hard for me to navigate.
Let us work on that. And I appreciate the feedback. There's also an opportunity. We are still working with the feedback from the previous board. So a lot of that contract stuff, we could pull some of that stuff out, but we also want to be transparent. We could put that all on the website, leave it out of your packet. So there's other things we could do. I think we can do the links in PDF, but
I'm sure someone knows.
yeah, well.
You need
1-year-old kid.
Yeah.
that's the right call.
But I hear you, and I think if we can't figure that out, let us try a couple of different options that maybe help you maneuver through the long document.
Yeah.
Those chapters in the PDF could also be, or linking from the agenda. I mean, linking from the agenda, I think would be my like number one option. I think that'd be rad because you can just like click down.
Or even if you put a page number, you can put the page number and it'll take you there.
Yes, yeah, any such thing.
Noted.
Thank you. And yes,
Different topics.
Yes.
In looking ahead, and it's partially just my interest overall, as we've been talking about, and Margo, but the community engagement side of things, just like it may be cutting across these, but an opportunity to hear a bit on how we're thinking about that in the coming months is of interest. I know agendas are very full, so just if and when there's opportunity to share that work with you.
This might be an opportunity for you and Phil to talk about what we discussed in terms of extra meetings and how we might approach that. Happy to do that, or.
Sure, I'll defer to you because I know you have.
Yeah, we just talked about, whether or not we should schedule interim meetings for briefings primarily as opposed to decision making. And around this budget, Director Mueller and Jim and Emily and I sat down and talked about, at least for now, what would be sufficient to give you enough context on the budget. So Lori helped shape her discussion to meet those needs, but the question still remains, how y'all feel about the need for maybe a separate meeting in the interim between now and March, or between March and April, I guess, just focused on the budget and be able to really dive deep, ask a lot of questions, have a work session as opposed to a decision-making business meeting. So that's still on the table. And maybe now's a good time to sort of just generally take the temperature to see if that's something we might want to tentatively schedule.
And a few points of that could be, for example, on public engagement. It could be a deep dive on the capital projects. Bill and his team have done an outstanding job on the PIR pump station, getting that to 30% design. So now that we're at 30%, we're a lot more certain about what the cost impacts are going to be. It's a huge milestone for Bill and his team, but we don't have time to share that with you, right? So those would all be things that we could do outside of a business meeting. What we talked about with the chair and vice chair, acknowledging that many of you actually have jobs, is that we could potentially do those in the evening. We would record them so that, and there'd be no decisions. So quorum is not a problem. We can notice those. We'll record them. You could watch them at your leisure if you're unable to attend. We could also provide childcare or other things if that's supportive of board members who might need that. We would have to have some lead time to do that. But we wanted to acknowledge the impacts on her work life by having you have to take time out of your professional day. So what we don't know yet is which of those topics you'd like to spend that time on. And so we're happy to spend time with you and make sure you have the information, but we wanted to only do that in areas where you actually want to hear from us. So.
And I would add, I think regardless of requests on specific topics, I think moving forward with as far as the agendas, if there are significant informational items, we probably will be moving those to like an evening work session if we can't fit them on a regular agenda.
What might be helpful is for you all to think about which of those things you would like more information on, and then you guys could have a discussion, and we could either meet individually with people who, if there's only one person, we could then work on a calendar for those broader items and let you guys wrestle with that a little bit. But we would love to spend more time with you and make sure you have the information you need.
Just going to ask, are there anything there that we've got that are sort of deadline driven that we kind of have to address, that we need to?
Budget for sure. And there are probably some additional task orders and contracts that will come up between now and the end of the year. You guys will need to, you don't have to complete my evaluation, but at some point you need to do that. So there are a few sort of deadline driven things. We've tried to highlight most of those in that calendar, and the proposed dates are consistent with the known deadlines.
I guess the one I was wondering, right, you'd mentioned the debt, and so I didn't know what the state was or wasn't, backing us into a corner on timelines.
Well, it's part of the general obligation bond program, and we had planned in the current year for two different offerings. The bank offering, which is the money that right now is paying for the spending that we're doing in the bond program. And then the state had offered a low interest borrowing that was supposed to come to us early last spring, a year ago. And so we've been working with them on the language and those documents for quite some time. And Colin is continuing to work with them on that. So we have funds to be able to continue to pay for our bond program right now, but this is the second tranche of the debt. And so those two together are going to carry us through the first 2 years of the capital bond program. So it'll be coming soon. As
We
soon as,
haven't ironed out all the trouble yet.
yes, so we haven't gotten the final set of documents that then need to have legal review prior to coming to you. And the timeline was just getting crunched. So we're going to,
We have enough bond money not to have to stop projects.
we have over $15 million.
I'm sorry, I'm gonna roll this along. And if there's additional discussion, I think, I know some people have to leave, so. Director.
Thank you, Chair. I have two comments. One is recognizing that we have regular monthly meetings. My suggestion in terms of cadence would be that we strive to not have more than 3 total meetings in any 2-month span. If we're adding additional work sessions or special meetings. Second comment with that in mind is my sense is, given the compressed budget timeline for this year, that we should probably plan for an additional, maybe shorter meeting either in March or April to discuss budget in greater detail. And if we find that we do not need that additional meeting, then we can cancel it. But I think it would be better to plan for it and cancel than the other way around.
Seeing a fair number of heads nodding.
So why don't Vice Chair and myself with the team, you all can suggest some timing and what that agenda would look like to help prepare us.
Yeah, we'll get on that early next week. And we, again, people comfortable with an evening timeframe. And then it probably, I think, Chair Stegman, you had suggested virtual only so that people
Yeah,
can come in.
virtual only.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I really appreciate that. I know that that's a thoughtfulness that I really appreciate in terms of making schedules work. I know it always gets complicated for people, but having things in something in the evening for me to be able to focus on is very, very
I
precious.
appreciate you saying something, and it's really critical to our equity work. So thank you.
Appreciate it all.
The only comment I would make about evening meetings, and I'm happy to do it, is that given my day job, I have certain evening meetings that I have to be at city council meetings or city budget committee meetings. So I don't want to be difficult about any of that, but
We'll do our best to
may provide an obstacle.
So, but they'll be recorded. So, and especially, I mean, you do know everything, so. I'm not that worried about you,
But the other thing is, once they call me, and we'll set up a time for you to meet with whoever you need to meet with on the team. You know, we can have a cup of coffee or some lunch, or bring you down to the district, or we'll meet you at your office. We can walk you through all that. So don't hesitate if you have questions. And obviously, if you're asking questions that I think benefit the entire group, we'll document those and share them. So we do appreciate your questions and want you to feel safe asking them.
Yes. All right. Well, with that, unless there's anything else for the good of the order.
The only thing briefly, I have the paperwork for related to your stipends. I think Angel's on site somewhere and he can help with it. I think I don't know if it can all be completed today, and I can send it out electronically as well, but we have that available for you.
So there is an I-9 and a 990 form
Oh.
that you have to fill out.
Yeah.
We'll email you those forms
If not, she'll send them to you.
Yes.
later for this meeting.
Yeah, for the I-9 form, we have to actually physically review documents, so it's possible that you won't have those documents with you today, but we do have to look at those and make sure that you are eligible for employment in the United States.
We'll email those to you, and we can print them out for you today before you go. And I'll help they're printed, so you can take hard copies now, and you'll get them in your inbox if that's. We do encourage you to take the stipend. It's in the budget. You guys are providing a public service. You're adding real value to our work.
But we can pass if it's.
You may, certainly. We will put the money you could use. You will approve any spending we do.
We can donate it to the snack fund.
Thank you all. Great meeting. This is such a fun group, and I just really enjoy all of this. So with that, meeting is adjourned.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Hey, there are cards thanking our speakers from the last time.
If you wouldn't mind signing those before you go, I would appreciate it.
Good job.